Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
This episode of the Sports Spectrum podcast with Bobby Robbins, former pro hockey player, is brought to you by Concussion International. $38 a month and you release a child from poverty. That's all it takes for you to make a difference in a child's life. We're talking about food, education, medical care, vocational training, all done in the name of Jesus. Compassion.com/sportspectrum. That's the website to go to. Compassion.com/sportspectrum. And you can sponsor a child and provide them with hope, releasing them from poverty. I got to tell you, a couple weeks ago, I went to a conference and Compassion was there. Got to meet up with the guys from there, doing great work releasing children from poverty. And I got to experience what it was like in the field, seeing the work that Compassion was doing, where our money was going. They have this virtual reality experience, which is so cool. And it takes you right to the place that you see the money that you're giving through Compassion and the difference that it's making. So I can't encourage you enough. Go to compassion.com/sportspectrum. $38 a month. This is a great gift to release a child from poverty. Go to compassion.com/sportspectrum. Sponsor a child today. Today on the podcast is part one of a two-part conversation with former pro hockey player, both in the NHL and the AHL. Bobby Robbins is our guest today. And I knew Bobby from Twitter, got to meet him there and kind of connect with him. And I saw his witness for Christ, and I saw a guy who had played in the NHL, and I thought, this will be a fun interview to talk to this guy. Holy cow, he has an amazing story, an incredible story, to the point where we had to break this up into two parts, and this is part one. And Bobby played college hockey, just to give you a little background on him, at the University of Massachusetts Lowell. He was born in 1981, so he's 37 years old now, signed his first pro contract with the Ottawa Senators back in 2006. Played hockey overseas from 2008 to 2010. Skated in more than 500 professional hockey games, had over 150 pro fights during his hockey career. And here's the funny thing about his story as far as hockey goes. He made his NHL debut October 8th, 2014 with the Boston Bruins, 1 week shy of his 33rd birthday, which made him the oldest rookie to make an NHL Opening Day Roster. He was also named two-time AHL Man of the Year and then announced his retirement July 9th, 2015. So he spent 11 seasons as a professional hockey player. But really, Bobby's life, Bobby's story doesn't begin until after hockey. And there's so much that went into this interview and this podcast. And Bobby's story is an incredible one, a story of a spiritual awakening, a story of walking away from God, a story of hockey becoming a God, and then redemption, coming out of a deep depression, coming to faith in Christ. And Bobby does this cool thing, which we'll talk about in part two of the conversation, but he goes on Twitter every day and basically does and reads the Bible in a year. And he puts it on video. He does it live on Twitter, on Periscope, and just goes Twitter live with his sitting at a desk with his Bible and reading the Bible in a year. Such good stuff here from Bobby. Take a listen to this amazing testimony. This is part one of a two-part conversation with Bobby Robbins, former pro hockey player, here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Take a listen. Bobby, welcome to the program.
Hey, Jason. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Hey, it's good to talk to you, Bobby. Let's just start, I guess, because there's a lot of places we can start. Let's start with your journey to becoming a pro hockey player, maybe growing up as a kid and what that looked like for you. Was hockey always that big sport that you played? Tell us about that growing up.
Yeah, hockey was always my number one. I grew up in northern Wisconsin and just started playing hockey at a young age. 5 years old, I got on the ice, and like so many hockey players, I fell in love with it early. And, my first grade teacher, we went around the room and she said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And it was doctors, lawyers, firemen. And I said, "I want to be a pro hockey player." And, that was at 5, 6 years old. I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And I think it was always more of a pipe dream, and it didn't really dawn on me until a pretty significant moment in college. I was playing Division I college where I really grasped that it was a possibility for me to play pro hockey. But since I was a kid, it was just that dream where you go out in the driveway and you're shooting pucks. You're just always picturing yourself in the NHL, and it was like one step after the other. I just kept evolving as a hockey player and getting better and better every year, and kept making that jump to the next level. And all of a sudden, there it was. I was out there on the ice taking the ice with the Boston Bruins.
So we're going to get to all of that in a little bit. I love your journey and the fact that you made it to the NHL, and there's a great story within that. And I also know your faith journey has been one that is really taken shape for you over the last few years, and we're going to talk about that in a minute as well. But what about growing up? Did you go to church? Was faith, church, God a thing in your household? Tell us about that.
Yeah, it definitely was. I was raised in a Christian home. My parents went to a Lutheran church. I was raised as a Lutheran, confirmed, baptized, confirmed, and everything. And as a really young boy at 7, 8, 9 years old, I felt really alive and filled with the Spirit. I would go to church, and I'd always been a writer ever since I can remember. And I would just write these Spirit-filled poems, and even got a couple of them published in a publication from the Lutheran. I think it's called the Lutheran Magazine. As a youngster, and really felt that Spirit, felt that connection, and just grew up in that church. And then by the time I hit my teen years, I'd say maybe 13, 14, 15, the world really ate me up, Jason. I mean, I got into punk rock music as an early age, like the skateboarding, mid-90s punk rock scene, and that music's some pretty wicked and rebellious stuff. And I just really defined myself with that music and with that skateboarding scene. And by the time I'd say I was 13, maybe 14 years old, at that point, I would say I was just an atheist. I didn't believe it at all. And I had some experiences. I had an experience with a teacher at a school I went to that, we found a book that said like God is dead on it. And we said, well, what is this? Is God dead? And that was a defining moment in my life where if I would have had a Christian teacher, he could have been, he said, no, this is just a lie. This is a deception, and showed me the truth. But, he had other beliefs, and, he kind of nurtured that rebellious seed that was in my heart and my circle of friends. So I kind of I went down that road of atheism, and I just didn't believe it at all. I rejected it at face value. I just said, it's not true. The Bible's not true. Jesus not true. None of it's true. We're just monkeys, and we're here and we die. And I really held on to that belief throughout high school until maybe in my 20s, my late 19, 20 years old, is when the music was always a big part of my life. And the music evolved from that punk rock scene from the 90s more into the hippie, psychedelic music scene from the 60s and 70s. And I think it was through that in my early 20s that I got led down another path of deception of, that hippie new age movement and everything that comes along with that, which opened me up to, the idea that it's not just black and white, that we're, that atheistic thought. It opened me up to that spiritualism and the spiritual thoughts of the new age, and opened me up to a lot of Eastern philosophies. And for me, I was from an early age, 9, 10 years old, I always was seeking the truth. I just knew in my heart, I was like, I want to know the truth.
Yeah.
Something just didn't feel right to me. As early on, I just sensed it. Something wasn't right. And I really was seeking that truth. And I think the devil exploited that and led me down all the right pathways. And, for me, spoiler alert, it wasn't until 35 years old or 35 years old that I came to Christ, for real. And, but it was after a lifetime of really seeking for the truth. I really wanted to know the truth of reality. And that led me deep, really deep down into the new age. And the testimony that the Lord gave me and the grace that he showed me and patience to pull me out of that lie and that deception it's just incredible for me to think about, because I'm an all-in kind of guy. Like, hockey, I'm all in. If it's hockey fighting, I'm all in. Whatever it is, I was all in the new age and willing to go go right down to the depths to find the truth of reality. And I think the Lord used me, that's just the kind of person that he made me out to be. And now that he converted my heart, now it's like, wow, I see why he put me through all those experiences, because I'm an all-in kind of guy. And now I'm all in for Jesus and looking to do his will. So it's been an interesting progression throughout my life, how he developed and just showed me such grace and mercy, really, is what it comes down to.
Bobby Robbins is our guest here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Bobby, in the time that you're going down the road of deception and kind of walking away from God or just kind of doing your own thing, at the same time, hockey is starting to grow in your life, I would presume, because you were a pro hockey player. So that's the formative years in sports as well, those late teens, those early 20 years. Tell me where you were hockey-wise, because I'm guessing from a worldly perspective, you look like you were doing some good things.
Exactly, and that's the funny part. Yeah, from a worldly perspective, I'm successful. I'm playing in the USHL, the United States Hockey League, as a 19-year-old. So that's the top junior league in America. It's a league for getting scouted by the NHL and scouted by Division I colleges. You know, guys are playing there to get Division I scholarships. And I'm there, I'm doing community service. I'm, appreciated in the community. I'm an important part of the team. And, from a worldly perspective, I put it in quotes, I was a good person, a good guy, but, the reality was I was spiritually and in the darkness when nobody's looking, I'm pursuing all these new age philosophies and, drugs and alcohol. But on the surface, I'm a good hockey player. I'm successful. And I land a scholarship at the University of Massachusetts Lowell, Division I, UMass Lowell. They compete in Hockey East, which is, I might be a little biased, but I think it's the best league in the country. So I'm out there playing hockey, and I keep progressing every year and getting better and better at hockey and really mastering my body. And so I became very self-centered. I was like, I can do this. I can master my body. I can accomplish these things. And as I'm really nurturing and developing that mentality of myself and my self-worth and my self-growth, and I was so big on personal growth. But as I'm doing that, I'm seeing it's getting results in the world, and I'm growing and having success. And, for me, my formula was you start wherever you're at. I went to UMass Lowell and, wasn't in the lineup. I was a healthy scratch is the term. It's when a guy's healthy, but the coach scratches your name off the lineup list and you're sitting in the stands watching. And so I'm out there for the first 5-6 games of my freshman year. And I'm like, realize I'm at the bottom of the barrel here. And what am I going to do? I have to keep getting better and keep developing myself. So athletically, I just developed a mindset where I was going to come into practice every single day and play it like it was game 7, like it was my last time on the ice. And for me, that was a big shift, because you can go through a practice going, 90%, 95%, but there's a difference between going at 95% and going all out, like it's like your life depends on it. So for me, at my freshman year at Division I hockey, something shifted in me where I went every single practice all out, like my life depended on it. And that would end up carrying me throughout my whole career, throughout college, 4 years of Division I, and then a 9-year pro career. It was every single day doing that. And I got better and better and better. And, by the end of 4 years at UMass Lowell, after really buying into the system and training and just improving myself every day, I went from not being in the lineup my freshman year to having this breakout senior season where I was the captain, leading scorer, MVP, male student athlete of the year, and signed an NHL contract with the Ottawa Senators right out of college. And so now I'm, 24, 25 years old, and I'm seeing all this worldly success and fame and notoriety. And I truly believe that it was all coming from my own inner strength. Like I had created that. I had made that happen. And I mean, it sounds ridiculous to say now, but looking back on it, I just see how the Lord was leading me, and with just that long-suffering patience that he must have had for me, just with my blinders on going through that. But it was at that point where I really invested in myself. And I think you have to be as an athlete, as a high-level athlete for sure. And it was at that point when I started my pro career, that's when I really dove in to the new age philosophies. And then it took that idea even further, because the new age tells you that you're actually creating that, you're manifesting that reality. So as I got more worldly success, I truly believed that I was actually creating that through my thinking.
Yeah.
And that's part of that deception of the new age. It's the secret and the law of attraction, and a lot of these really satanic philosophies that are spun in a different way, that it just looks like self-help and self-improvement. But what they really are is teaching you. It's the deception that you're creating it, you're in charge, and you do as thou wilt instead of doing the will of God. So it's the age-old deception from the Garden of Eden repackaged with a bit of a hippie twist to it. And that's where I was, functioning on that level, but also functioning as a high-level athlete.
Let's talk a little hockey for a second, because the position you play, I guess it's not really a position, it's more of a title of enforcer, I know, is what you kind of were known as during your hockey career. And there's a lot of other people, I've heard it called goons. I don't even know do they call people like that goons anymore? The guys that fight all the time. Is that a proper term?
I think it's embraced by some and kind of derogatory to others.
Did you not like that term, or did that term not bother you?
I mean, for a guy like me, it was the term goon. That was this was when was this? This was during the first lockout in 2005, 2006. Yeah. That was when I first broke into pro hockey. And those quote unquote goons, that was when they kind of got phased out of the league. There was a lot of these guys were monsters, 6'5", 6'6", just huge guys who really couldn't play hockey and weren't very effective hockey players, but were really effective hockey fighters.
Yeah.
And so every team had one of those guys, but it was right around that time, in the mid 2000s, that those guys got phased out of the league. And then the new enforcers, I guess is the better term for it.
Yeah.
Were guys who could actually play, who were good hockey players, who could play a regular shift, and were just really good checkers, really good forecheckers, and then also were not afraid to drop the gloves and chuck the knuckles. But I'd say, there's, just like in fighting, there was the heavyweight guys, and then there were middleweight guys. And guys like myself were kind of like a mid heavyweight. There was always, early in my pro career, there was always a guy who was above me, who was, the goon, who wasn't really an effective hockey player. But as hockey progressed, and then when I came up onto the scene into the NHL, it was my kind of player who became the heavyweight. So those big one-dimensional goons got phased out of the game, in 06, 07, 08, 09. And then players like me who were just, hardworking checkers, fourth-line guys who weren't afraid to fight, that's who came into the league. And because those guys, like myself and other guys like me, teams were looking at them to play a regular shift, not just go out there one or two times a game and fight.
Gotcha. Well, let's talk about, I think from a general fan perspective, fighting in hockey, and something I think from fans that attend and even watch, that there's an entertainment value to that for them. Oh, look, there's fighting in hockey, and it's not like that in really any other sport on a consistent basis. As an enforcer, explain the fight in hockey and how it comes about. I always wonder, are you looking for a fight every time you're going on the ice? Are you like, all right, if this guy comes at me, I'm dropping the gloves? Or is it just the fight kind of happens through the match and through the game and just kind of on the ice and the way it's working out?
I mean, it's a strange dynamic. It doesn't exist in any other sport.
Yeah.
And I mean, for me, I was I led my team in scoring, Division I hockey leading scorer. So I came into pro hockey, and I was always a big physical guy. I love body checking. It's my favorite part of hockey, is that physical aspect and checking guys. And I came to pro hockey and realized that guys who are going to check, there's an accountability factor, and that's the whole idea of the enforcer. If you're the goal scorer, Jason, on the other team, and I'm the checker, I come and check you, there's an enforcer who's going to come and challenge me to a fight and say, listen, you can't be checking Jason like that.
Right.
And it's a way to police the game and protect the skilled players. Well, my first 4 years pro, I really didn't fight. I played aggressively, and I fought 6-7 times a season, just when a fight would happen after a big hit, kind of these organic fights that happen at the spur of the moment. They're heated, aggression filled fights. But then I always watched the guys who were the actual fighters or those goons or enforcers, and I never saw myself as that. It seemed terrifying, and the reality is that it is terrifying. And so after my first year pro, I played in the minor leagues at the AAA level. It's called the American Hockey League. I played there, and after my first year pro, played 80 games at that level, and played hard every night, scored a decent amount of points, but only fought 6 or 7 times. Mm-hmm. And I had a coach, at my exit meeting at the end of the year, call me in and say, look me in the eye and say, Bobby, if you want to be a guy who plays in this league or plays in the NHL, you're going to have to be a guy who fights 20, 25 times a year. And I just didn't see myself as that. I didn't want to be that. I hated that aspect of the game. Fighting was terrifying, and it just wasn't my nature. I wasn't some guy who was fighting off the streets. I think I'd been in one tussling match in my whole life, aside from that.
Right.
So it wasn't in my nature. It was terrifying, and that actually led me to the reality. It's hard to say it, but the reality is that it was fear that really held me back from doing that. And he was right. I didn't believe him, but he was right. The next year I played at the AA level, and then I ended up jumping ship over to Europe and played for 2 years. And once you go to Europe, for me, I gave up on my NHL dream. I said, you know what? I'm not going to do this. I'm just going to go to Europe and have a good European career and just pursue that. I'm going to give up on my NHL dream. And it was after my second year in Europe. So this is after 4 years pro. I came back home and, had a really terrible year. Didn't really have any contract prospects, and was analyzing my life and saying, I think my hockey career is over. And then there was always a little regret, like this little ping in my heart that said, man, why didn't I do it? Why didn't I fight for real? I had signed an NHL contract with the Ottawa Senators and, went to training camp and played 2 exhibition games, but I didn't do it legit. Like I saw the guys who did it legitimately, and all those guys, they made the jump from the American Hockey League, and they're all in the NHL now. And I had this really interesting moment where I was like, it was fear that held me back. And this is around the time where I had met my wife. I fell in love, and I knew I wanted to marry this girl. And I'm like, what am I going to do with my life? So I made a list of 5 options, and the hardest option said fight my way to the NHL. Do it for real. I went over the pros and cons. And one of the cons in that list was I could die doing this. I realized how dangerous it is. It's the real deal. It's bare knuckle fighting. And something just changed inside me that summer, and I said, you know what, I'm going to do this. I committed to it, and I hooked up with a pro boxer. I learned how to fight for real, and I got in the best shape of my life. So it was like there was 2 aspects of training. I was training the hockey player. I knew I had to be the best hockey player I can be, but then there was the fight training as well. And so my career was really split up into 2 parts. My first 4 years where I didn't do it legit, and then my last 4 years where I did it legit. Like I fought everyone and really became a really good fighter just by fighting a lot. And that's when my career I redefined my career and became that enforcer, that 4th line checker in the new NHL, which was a speed game and where those one-dimensional goons weren't around anymore. And I became that role and ended up just getting contract after contract, and it all culminated in 2014. And I became the oldest rookie in the history of the NHL to make an opening day roster with the Boston Bruins at 32 years old. And that's like a dinosaur in hockey years. That's an old grandpa right there. But it was, it was just really controlling everything I could do. And for me, it was learning how to get my body in the best possible shape it could be. But then just for my role, it was learning how to handle the fear and actually do it and actually go out there and fight. So the long answer to your question is when I would go out there on the ice, I look at the lineup sheet. I know who's on the other team. Like, all right, we're playing against Philly. Okay, I know who their fighters are. And, I'm going to look to get in the fight right away and get it out of the way so I can just focus on playing good hockey afterwards.
But what's the purpose of a fight in the flow of a game? Like a coach telling you or a scout telling you need to fight more. So how does that help a team in the flow of a game? Yeah,
so there's two aspects to the fight game. One of them is the protection aspect, the policing of the game. You touch my skilled player, I'm going to come at you and let you know, there's an answer for that. The second one is the momentum factor. So the old saying is that, the only times in a hockey game when the entire arena is on their feet is when a goal's scored or when there's a fight.
Right.
And that's true, for good or for bad. When there's a fight happening, it's energy. It's so much energy in there, and it lights up an arena. So then you have the realization that as my job as an enforcer, I have the ability to impact the hockey game at key moments. So if, say, your team in the first period goes up 2 goals, we're down 2-0, I know right away, I'm like, okay, coach puts me out there, I'm looking for a fight. I'm going to ask a guy off the face-off to fight. If he says no, which they'll usually do because they don't want to give up their momentum, then I start running around. I'm trying to check everything in sight, running around like a heat-seeking missile. Hopefully I can just, annihilate a guy with a body check so that the other team's enforcer is forced and has to come and challenge me to a fight. Hopefully I win the fight. Hopefully that turns the momentum around, gets my guys on the bench fired up, or if we're playing at home, gets the arena fired up. And then you get the momentum going. You can feel the energy in an arena. Athletes who've been around, they can feel it. Fans can feel it too. You can feel when the energy gets sucked out of an arena. You can hear a pin drop. You can feel when that energy is building and the momentum's building. And that's what a hockey fight has the potential and the ability to do, is to change the momentum of a hockey game. It's just like a big hit. With a huge hit, instantly in a second you can change the momentum of the hockey game. And that's really the role of a fourth line checker. They're known as energy guys. They control the energy of a hockey game. And then so guys who are fighters, who have the fight game on their job description, they kind of adapt to the game, and they know when the right times and the wrong times to fight are. And it's really a skill that can't be taught. You just know. For me, I would have this prickling feeling on my skin, the back of my neck. I was like, well, it's time to fight now. And in the past, I realized fear would say, I always felt it. So I felt like it was always in my nature. I always felt it's like, now's the time I should fight. But I let the fear consume me. After that, during the second half of my career, I felt that, and I harnessed that and realized that was an instinct that I had. I was like, well, now's the time to fight. And I had to just went out there and faced the fear and did it.
Bobby, what's the worst fight you've been in your career?
Worst fight I've been in? It's the fights where I got knocked out. I think I got turned off probably 3 or 4 times. And
when you say turned off, you mean like concussion, like knocked out?
Yeah, the lights went out. For me, I never got knocked out cold where I was laying on the ice.
Right.
I guess in hockey you call them TKOs, technical knockouts, where the lights go out for a split second, and you're in a fight. The lights go out, and you wake up, your eyes open, and you're on the ice, and you pop up, and it's a really weird feeling. That happened to me about 3 or 4 times throughout my career. Number one, it's embarrassing because then you go back and watch the film, and you never see the punch coming that turns you off, and so you go and you lost the fight decisively. And then it's also a scary feeling because, you realize your brain took some damage there.
Sure.
And then, you feel some lingering effects from that. And I know for me, I just say I'm going to push through it. Like I'm going to take some pills and I'm going to push through this because I'm a fighter and that's what I do. And I can't narrow it down to one specific one, but I'd say the 3 or 4 times where my brain turned off, those were the worst ones I've experienced.
Bobby Robbins is our guest here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. All right, you alluded to it earlier. It's October 8th, 2014, and you make your NHL debut with the Boston Bruins, the oldest rookie, as you mentioned, to make an NHL Opening Day roster at age 32, just a week shy of your 33rd birthday. Tell us about that day, what that must have felt like to finally get to the pinnacle of what you had, as you say on your website, fought your entire life for, was to get to the NHL.
It was incredible to see a lifetime of work, come to that point. Like I said, from that 6-year-old in first grade who said, I'm going to play pro hockey. It was a lifetime pursuit and a dream come true. And I went out there and, I don't remember much of that game because I received a concussion in that game. And I took a few huge hits. I took a shot in the fight. So I don't even really remember the exact moment that it happened. But I went from being on the top of the world and having my dream come true to waking up the next morning after that opening night with a concussion and being like, wow, I'm in a lot of trouble here. So for me, it was a bit of a bittersweet a moment in my life. It was a dream come true, but then it was where really the nightmare started. And this nightmare of post-concussion syndrome and really going down this spiral into mental instability, post-concussion syndrome, and depression, drug abuse, suicide. It all culminated from that moment of being on the top of the world and finally making the NHL, finally pursuing my dream, finally, in worldly terms, making it. But as I made it at that moment, in worldly terms, with that success, I was spiritually the furthest away from God and spiritually bankrupt and so far down the path of deception that it looked like, it was just going to eat me up and I wouldn't be able to come back from it. And I see now, looking back on it, how the Lord took me from that highest point down to the pit. And that's, we'll get into that, but that's actually what led, throughout that pit is where the Lord scooped me up and converted me. And that's where I became a Christian.
Tell me.
So
sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah. So it's tough I wish I had all these great memories of the NHL and being there but I don't remember a lot of it. I was trying to play through a concussion and it just ended up eating me up and ended up being the beginning of my demise, which I thought was the end, but I think God had other plans, and that's where he regenerated me and gave me a new heart and converted me in that pit.
Well, let me go to the day after that debut then, because you said you woke up, you had the concussion, and you knew something was wrong. Can you take us through those moments just of realizing that something wasn't right? And yet I think you still played in a couple more games or tried to play through a few more games. So tell me about just that moment and waking up. I don't know if there was fear there. You talked a lot about fear earlier, or just waking up and knowing something wasn't right.
Yeah, as a fighter, it's alarming looking back on it now. I fought 150 pro fights, and just the amount of shots I took in my head, and the amount of times you get a concussion. We called it getting dinged in the fight game. You get dinged, you get your bell rung.
Yeah.
Well, now people know those are concussions. But, fighters, we just call it getting dinged, and we had these brain pills we'd take and just try and sleep it off. And that's what always worked for me throughout my career. I just sleep it off, and, maybe you feel that groggy feeling in the morning. You grit through it, you take some more pills, and then you get back out there and you live to fight another day. And that's just how it always was for me. And then I woke up after that opening night and had that concussion, and it just didn't go away. It usually goes away after I'd sleep, and I had my methods of taking care of it. Woke up, I was like, oh no, this isn't good. I just made the NHL. If I ever had brain injuries or concussions, I didn't say a word to anybody.
Right.
For me, I knew. The reality is, as a fighter, as a 32-year-old fighter, I didn't want to be a guy known as the concussion guy or known as the guy who has concussion problems. And that's the nature of hockey players in general. We're tough guys. We play through any injuries. You break your nose, you get it cracked back into place, you get some stitches, and you come back out on the ice. You get your bell rung, you don't say anything, you play the rest of the game, you don't remember any of the game, you go sleep it off, and you wake up the next morning and you're good to go. Well, I woke up in Detroit, and it wasn't going away. Just knew I had to sleep, just tried to sleep throughout the day. Ended up really playing when I shouldn't have that night. Looking back on it now, it was a huge regret because I didn't realize, but when you have a concussion and you take more shots, it has a compound effect and the cumulative effect. And I ended up taking 2 heavy shots from body checks in that Detroit game, and really don't remember much of that game. And it lasted another 2 days. Played the next night against Washington and took a huge hit where I didn't remember taking the hit. I was just out there, blacked out on instinct, really playing on instinct, and took a huge hit. Ended up getting in a fight, and that was where it took a big turn for the worst, and the concussion got even worse. And after that, it just never improved for many, many months.
That was part 1 of our conversation with Bobby Robbins, the former pro hockey player, here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Really interesting to hear about hockey and fighting and his journey just to get to the NHL, and also where faith stood. And apparently faith was not in a good place for Bobby as he was leading into his hockey career and trying to figure out life and spirituality and really walking away, this sort of new age philosophy as he described it with us on part 1 of the podcast. Tomorrow on part 2, I can't encourage you to listen to part 2 more. Part 1 is sort of the fertile ground that sets up part 2 of the podcast, and it's an incredible story tomorrow that you'll hear in part 2 of his coming to faith in Christ, this deep depression that he went into and coming out of it, and the story of how he discovered God in a way. I even say it in the interview tomorrow, I've never heard a story like this, ever. And we've done almost 200 of these podcasts, over 200 of these podcasts now. And it's a story I've never heard. And just listen to part 2 tomorrow. That's all I can say with Bobby Robbins here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. So we thank Bobby for joining us. We also thank Compassion International for sponsoring this podcast. As I mentioned in the beginning, they do great work releasing a child from poverty for $38 a month. Food, education, medical care, vocational training. Those are 4 things that every single person, we take it for granted here in the U.S. We really do. And every single person deserves that, especially every single child. That training, those basic necessities, the food, the education, the medical care. Compassion.com allows us, you and me, to sponsor children for $38 a month and provide that for them. Here's how you do it. Go to compassion.com/sportspectrum, compassion.com/sportspectrum, and there it is. You release a child from poverty by sponsoring them through Compassion. Go to compassion.com/sportspectrum, sponsor a child today. Thanks for listening to part 1 of our conversation with Bobby Robbins. Please tune in to part 2 tomorrow morning. I promise you it will blow your mind, his story. It's really an amazing one. Part 2 of our conversation with Bobby Robbins coming tomorrow on the Sports Spectrum podcast. You can email me, jason@sportspectrum.com, with any ideas, any thoughts on the podcast. And of course, you can reach us on social media at sports_spectrum. Have a great rest of your day. We'll see you next time right here on the Sports Spectrum podcast.